Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Young. I am the CEO and Creative Director of EYStudios. I'd like to welcome you to our Make It Make Sense webinar series. You know, there's oftentimes a lot of confusing elements in the land of e-commerce, and so our goal here with this webinar series is to make it make sense. And today's topic is, as you see here, simple SEO strategies for e-commerce merchants. I'm coming at you live from my home, stately Yonge Manor, just north of Atlanta. And I'm about to be joined here by Jess Richmond. So let's go to the next slide. I want to introduce Jess. Jess, are you there?
Hey, how are you?
Hey, good, Jess. Good to see you. How's the weather in your neck of the woods? I know you're not right there in Atlanta. Tell everybody where you're at.
I'm actually in Greenville, North Carolina, and it's actually really sunny and hot.
Okay, good. We've had some pretty weather, but it's a little bit cloudy and overcast today, but I've got the sunshine in my heart. I'm ready to go. I'm really excited about this this webinar series. Of course, doing it with you, Jess. Anytime I get to collaborate with you, it's a good time. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, it's been good. But Jess, introduce yourself, kind of what you do at EYStudios. Brag on yourself a little bit, if you would.
sure. So I started my career as a journalist, worked as a newspaper editor for a while, and then I fell in love with SEO. I really fell in love with, okay, I can get this story to go higher up on a search result if I do certain things. And it became addicting. I just wanted to learn more and more about it. And so, as you know, newspapers are kind of a dying breed.
A little bit. Yeah.
So I really moved into SEO. I've been working in SEO for about 6 years now. I'm now the digital content specialist, SEO person at EYStudios, and I'm loving it. It's been great.
Yeah, well, our clients are loving you. I've gotten some good reports on you, Jess, and the job that you've done here, and we'll be talking about kind of how you do an SEO audit and that sort of thing, what you do on the job, and pulling back the curtain a little bit. But let's go and explain a little bit about what's going to happen on today's webinar. You know, like we've been billing it with the ads we've been putting out there. It's a no-nonsense approach to SEO, Jess, and this is not intended to be a deep dive into SEO. We're going to be covering a lot of topics. You know, any one of these topics we could commit an entire hour to, if not way more than that. But Jess, you know, in my job, I talk to a lot of merchants, of business owners, and you know, I think it's a mistake to assume that if you've been around e-commerce for any length of time, that you're just automatically an SEO expert. You know what all the terms mean, you know exactly how to apply it. It's just not the case. You know, a lot of folks are just busy running their business. And as we'll talk about later, they've been burned, right, with SEO and different agencies and that sort of thing. And it can be overwhelming with this. And so the goal here is just to talk simply about SEO, to not put people to sleep with it. Well, how would you expand upon that, the no nonsense approach, what they can expect, Jess?
Honestly, we just want to explain SEO like we're talking with our friends. This is how I would explain my job to my friends when I'm sitting at a party. This is what I do. Let me make it as simple as possible.
That's right. Well, as you'll see here in the next bullet, this is important to me personally. This is not a sales pitch. You know, one of the things I can't stand about webinars, I sit in on a lot of them, is that they're glorified sales pitches. This is not a sales pitch. You know, the entire thing is going to be geared to do exactly what we just talked about, give you some good information. We obviously offer marketing services, but whether you apply some of these principles to the team you're already working with, or you hire whoever, we just hope it helps you. You know, if you decide to go with EY, great. You know, we have a lot of our current clients that are on this webinar. I appreciate you guys tuning in, but this is not going to be a sales pitch. You don't have to worry about that. With that said, we are offering a free SEO audit for anybody that wants one. It's there, it's available. If you want to take advantage of that, great. Not, no big deal. We're also going to be offering a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. All right, so please send in those questions. If there's anything we're skipping past, if unfortunately we say something that doesn't make sense, let us know. Ask those questions. We'll be sure to get to those. We'd love to get this thing as interactive as possible. So please hit us up with your questions. You can try and stump us. You can put whatever into the chat, and we welcome that. We love interactivity on these webinars. So again, we appreciate you guys being there. Hope this is good content. Let's get right into it. Just one of the things, and you know this is big on my heart, something I think a lot about. And you know, we can always put it off on the merchant, but we have to look internally and say, what is the responsibility of a marketing agency? And to me, it's part of what we've just talked about, being that trusted advisor to be able to communicate ideas in a way that makes sense, right? It's so common in e-commerce that you get lost in the buzzwords, and there's a lot of just dry analytical behavior. It just gets boring, and this should be fun. I mean, e-commerce to me is fun. It's why I keep doing it after 18 years. I love it. And but we have to be passionate about it. I think once you lose your passion, you got a responsibility to keep it, right? Because the merchants that are paying you, the marketing agency, they want to see that. From your perspective, Jess, what is the responsibility of a marketing agency?
I think that the way that SEO is currently operating in the marketing agency world is failing clients. It's
Yeah,
really not giving them what they need. What clients need is for that huge burden to be taken off their shoulders. They don't need to be in the nitty-gritty of dealing with this every day. They need to know what's going on. They need to understand what's going on, but they probably don't have the time to do it themselves.
yeah,
But also, a lot of SEO agencies purposely try to confuse you. They use those buzzwords. They try and complicate the sales pitch so that you're going, well, I can't do that by myself. I have to go with these guys. I
right.
have to pay $15,000 for them to do my SEO, and that's just insane.
Yeah.
I've worked for those larger SEO agencies, and I'm doing way more at EYStudios for my clients than I ever did for the $15,000
Yeah.
clients.
Yeah, we work your butt off here with that. We put you to work, but you're right. And obviously, SEO is an investment. Nobody is making light of that. It is an investment. We're going to be talking about the best way to get the ROI there. But you got to think about the bottom line with it. So, with that in mind, let's keep going as we look to demystify, as it says here, the SEO. But like I mentioned, Jess, I talked to a lot of merchants, talked to a lot of business owners. And when you even bring up SEO, it's a sore subject, and for good reason, right? The first bullet, they've been burned. Like I mentioned earlier, they've been they've talked to companies that made these huge promises about page one of Google and all these various things. We'll be talking about that, and they get burned, right? And the next bullet is it's a long game. That's hard, right? I mean, when you're talking about the investment here, you realize it's not going to happen overnight. Jess, I don't know if I told you, my wife Gina and I, we started a vegetable garden, and Gina is so excited about it. She planted the carrots and everything. It was only like a couple of days ago. She asked me, she goes, "Where are these carrots?" I said, "Gina, you just put it into the ground. You got to give the stuff time." They said, "Well, it says 7 to 10 days. You should start seeing progress." It's like, well, give it a little time. The carrots will grow, and SEO is a lot the same way, right? You put it into the ground. You can't yell and just go grow. You've got to give it time to make sense. Sometimes this stuff takes months, even years, to get the right effect that you need. It's a long game, right, Jess?
Absolutely. And I mean, that is a big thing that we see with a lot of our clients is they want it immediate. They want immediate changes. But like you said, with clients being burned by other SEO agencies, I just did an audit last night on a company that they worked with 5 different SEO agencies.
5. Wow.
5. And I did an audit and I said, "Did you pay them? Because you should get your money back."
Wow, that's blunt.
It was that bad. It looks like no one had touched it.
Really.
Um, So, I mean, I don't blame them for shying away from SEO. Like, I understand where they're coming from at that point.
Right. Well, Jess, one of the things we see a lot with merchants is that they either have their in-house marketing team, or of course they'll outsource, like you're saying. They'll hire another agency to come and do the work. One of the things that we're really passionate about as far as SEO strategies is to think about the total experience, right? Can you speak to that? Just kind of have the big picture of what to keep in mind?
Yeah, honestly, so what I like to say to everyone is we want to put your customers' common sense first,
Right.
and then we'll get to the Google standards. So we want to make your website navigation friendly, user friendly. Everything makes sense to the user. They understand how to get their products, they understand how to navigate your website, all of that good stuff. They also want to understand what your site's about. So that's where Google comes in. So you're really putting the correct information into your website so that people can find it. It's the right words for the right people. That's all
That's right.
SEO is.
Right. And Jess, obviously with the marketing team or agency, they can't handle everything, in fairness to them, right? And that's why it's so important to not have a siloed approach to marketing, right? It has to be a comprehensive, full look at that, because sometimes the marketing team is not handling the usability, the overall experience. That's obviously a key part to making sure your SEO works. And so to get out of that siloing, and I'm saying this as a business owner, right? I mean, I've got various departments within EYStudios, but a business owner has to see the value, right? To really buy into, okay, we're going to get after this with an SEO strategy. They have to see it. And sometimes the marketing team has to present those KPIs. What does KPI stand for? Sorry if this is a buzzword, but what's KPI for those that are not initiated? Key performance indicators, right? And so you've got your KPIs. Here's another one real quick. Sorry for the buzzwords, but there's OKRs, okay? And OKR stands for objectives and key results. What I see happening a lot is that the marketing team will think about all these KPIs. We got to hit this, we got to do that. But the suits, the folks in charge of the business, they don't get it, or at least they've not been explained how those KPIs really impact the business, and so they don't view it as a priority. And so the SEO stuff gets, if you're not tired of acronyms, it gets shuffled aside because it doesn't become a key part of the business strategy. Jess, would you agree? What do you think?
Absolutely. I think SEO is not a department on its own.
Right,
SEO
exactly.
is a strategy that everyone should be a part of.
That's what I'm trying to say. The entire team has to be on board. And unfortunately, we see that siloing happen way too often, where part of the company gets it, but the rest don't. And it creates this herky-jerky vibe, and the strategy ultimately doesn't work. So those are some reasons why I think some businesses shy away with that. Let's keep going to the next slide. And Jess, like I mentioned earlier, I'd love for you to kind of pull the curtain back and talk about how you conduct an audit. What do you look for? You just mentioned you looked at something last night. You saw that the company had done business with 5 other agencies, right? But what are you looking for? Okay, let's really go deep. What are the things that you're putting a magnifying glass to?
Sure. So what I really want to do is Google has 200 different standards that they look for when they're measuring a page. That's not what I'm going to do. 200, that's way too many for everyone to try and measure up to. So we're just going to try and go for the basics. So basically try and think of it as like Swiss cheese, and you're just trying to fill the holes. You're not trying to build a whole sandwich. You're just trying to fill the holes of that Swiss cheese, so that you have a baseline. You have a baseline, good website, and from there you can build with content, you can build with marketing, you can build in all sorts of different directions. But if you have these kind of holes in the bottom of your base, nothing else is going to be able to stack on top of it.
That's right. I like the Swiss cheese analogy. I'm going to steal that from you. That's good. So you got to fill the holes. There's so many holes that you're looking for, and you've got to look for the most egregious ones. Is yes. What I'm hearing you say.
So I start with keyword research, and I think that's the next slide if we want to go there.
Okay.
So I start with keyword research. So keywords, basically, just so we understand what a keyword is, it's the important words that you want people to be, for your site to be coming up when they search for those words. Right. So things like Swiss cheese is going to have a lot of results. There's going to be a lot of people competing for that. Every deli in the country is going to be trying to competing for Swiss cheese. Now, if you have the most organic, dairy-free, Swiss cheese, that's what you're going to be using as your keyword, so you can differentiate between you and all those other competitors. So it's really about finding out what keywords you're capable of going after, what are your maybe high, maybe your reach goals, and then just seeing where you're at. So a lot of what I do is rank tracking. So I get all those keywords together, I do some research. What are people searching for? What is the most traffic going to? And then I see, all right, where are you ranking? Where are your competitors ranking? And what can we do about it? Because the #1 result on Google gets 32% of all the clicks.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are not on the first page, so that's the first 10 results, you're not going to get anything. That's 75% of all the clicks on that first page.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right, and I love what you're saying. Like to use the cheese example with the dairy. That sounds nasty, by the way, the dairy-free Swiss cheese. But you know, what I'm hearing you say is you can't be too broad with the keywords, right? You've got to narrow it in. Just when you're doing your research and you're going in there and looking under the hood, are you keeping in mind their competition as well, or how does that play in?
So when I talk to customers, I like to get a good feel of what their goals are. Are they trying to focus on a specific product like non-dairy cheese? Are they trying to go after a specific competitor? Are they having trouble getting their new product line off the
Off the ground, right?
So if competition is a real problem for them, I definitely want to keep that in mind. I do it regardless, but that's, I can move that up in terms of priority. I want to see if maybe they figured out something that, maybe you haven't. Maybe they're using how to cut Swiss cheese properly. Maybe they have a whole bunch of blog posts about cutting Swiss cheese, about the history of Swiss cheese. I mean, maybe they've really gone all out, and you can figure out, oh, well, maybe I can try and do some of that too.
Right. For everybody attending here, we're going to be sending them Swiss cheese, EYStudios branded Swiss cheese to make you remember this webinar. But when we think about,
funny is I'm lactose intolerant.
right. I'm just not going to eat the dairy-free Swiss cheese. But one of the things when I think about keywords, Jess, is the language used by the customer. Sometimes we think about keywords and we're forgetting what the customers, how they actually talk, right? The language that they're using, and thinking about the customer during the entire cycle or the entire customer journey, right? Sometimes they're further along than you might think. They're initiated, as they know about the cheese, they know about the dairy-free options, they know about it, but then past that initiation, they have to do their research, right? So they're thinking about things from a research perspective that's different from that initial, that initiation, right? So they're doing their research, and then they're doing what? They're comparing, they're looking at other options like we're talking about with the competition, they're looking at this and that. All of this ties into different types of wording, right? And what they're doing. I know when I'm looking at something, when I'm doing research, a comparative, I'm not going to use the same words. And of course, that extends right into the buying, the transaction part, and the ultimate experience of when you actually get the product, when you're eating the cheese, Jess. So when you think about the entire cycle and the words that a customer uses, how are you advising merchants with that in mind?
I think the #1 thing that you need to understand is who your audience is.
Right.
So not who you think your audience is, who your audience actually is.
Right.
So lots of, analytics, data research, anything you can possibly do to get a kind of like a pulse on who likes your products. If it's all California 20-year-old men, you might need to say like cool threads, near me, just like cool, awesome, bruh, like that might be some of the words they use. Or if you're doing boomers in New England, they're going to do completely different words than millennial in California. So you really need to tap into your audience. You need to understand that there's generational differences, that men and women type in things differently, that people maybe don't search the way that you do. So really doing that research is key. You need to, take off your business owner hat and you need to put on your customer hat.
That's extremely well said. That really resonates with me, what you're saying about it's not just who you think your customers are, it's who they really are. It's what they're really doing. What's the data really showing about their behavior? And it's so important, like you said, with the hat, you got to think like a customer. You have to be passionate about what they're passionate about, because when you're not as a brand, it shows, right? It's going to come all the way down to the content that you're putting out there for SEO, because you may not be passionate. And I talk to merchants all the time, unfortunately, that are in that boat. They've been doing it for too long, or they just come into it, they bought a business, but they're not really passionate about the product line, and invariably the marketing suffers, Jess, right?
Absolutely. And I think you've said this many times. If you can't be passionate about it, hire someone that will be passionate for you.
That's right. Somebody will do it for you. Well, anything else on keywords before we move on?
No, I think that's really everything I had on keywords. It's really just finding the right words for the right people.
Right. Well, this next part is super important with technical SEO. And like we were talking about earlier, how important it is to get the entire team bought in on the importance of what to do with technical SEO. But explore that a little bit with the URLs and whatnot here, Jess.
So now we're going to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty back
Stay with
end,
us. Right.
the harder part. So this is the stuff that I think that a lot of people do struggle with. So when you're setting up a URL, you might just be like, all right, well, let me just put the product name in. That's the URL, whatever, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of what the way people set up websites is just, well, let me get this done. They're not thinking logically about, oh, Google's going to look at every single aspect of my URL and judge it.
Right.
Or every part of their page title, or how many headings you have. There's a lot of things that Google really cares about, and it changes constantly. So, a few years ago, we would have been sitting here talking about meta keywords.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a thing anymore. Google doesn't care about how many meta keywords you put in the back end. They're not going to look at them anymore. So it's important to keep on top of this. Attend webinars like this, read SEO articles, understand that Google is constantly evolving to better serve their customers, not to better serve you.
Well said. That's right. Well, when we think about the URLs, what Google looks at, as a usability guy, everybody knows that's my thing, is branding and really making sure that experience is there. But navigation obviously comes up, Jess, is how we are constructing the site from a navigational standpoint, because it's so important to the user experience to make sure there's an intuitive flow. That's a constant, struggle sometimes, particularly with new clients who've come in and they've just got kind of a hornet's nest in the way that they've structured their site. But that affects things not only from a user perspective, but also with the way that the site is crawled, right? With the way the flow that it's looking for. Could you kind of expand on that for me, Jess?
Sure. So I think one of the best examples I can give is a really common one that people do is, so they write a blog and they make the URL 10 things I hate about you blog. And that's the URL. They have blog at the end. But when they actually go into the URL, now the website's going to be website.com/blog/10 things I hate about you -blog. So now you have blog multiple times. That's not necessary, for one. And two, Google's going to look at you and be like, oh, they don't really know what they're doing. And they're going to probably rank you a little bit lower because of that.
Because, we talk about this so much. It's so important, like you mentioned with the blogs, to write like human beings, right? To make sure that the content sounds human and that you're connecting, because Google it's obviously not, the crawlers are not human, but it's looking at how the humans interact with that and ranking accordingly.
Yep. So there's a few things that you need to keep in mind with URLs. You don't want them to be forever long. You need to make sure they're fitting in the parameters, that they're not going to be cut off. You need to make sure that there's not a bunch of repeating navigation errors. There's a few things that you need to look at, but the most important thing is name it something that makes sense for your customers. An 800 character long URL with numbers and letters is never going to get you anywhere.
That's right. 100%. Okay, good stuff. Well, let's move on here to the next slide, and let's continue talking about technical SEO in regards to page titles. What do people need to know about that, Jess?
So I think the number one thing we need to get out of the way is page titles are different than headings.
Right, that's true. Yes.
A lot of people think, actually, number one common problem is the page title is the same as the heading.
Hmm.
So page title is a little bit more back end. It's what's going to show up in the top when in your tab when it says like what the name of the page is. It's also going to come up in Google. But the heading is what's going to come up on the actual page. So you can see here, 10 habits that could cost you a sale is that heading, but the name of that page is 10 habits that could cost you a sale, EYStudios.
Right.
So it just adds the business name at the end. It makes it a little bit more specific. It makes it easier to crawl for Google, understand where it's coming from. And then the heading itself can be a little bit more simple. You can cut that down, be specifically talking to customers.
Jess, you mentioned a few of them here, but what are some common mistakes that you see merchants make when it comes to page titling? What are some common errors that you see when you do an audit?
Not having one at all is a pretty common one. Another one is like one word page titles. So you want to really be descriptive here. You don't want to be too descriptive,
Right.
but you want to be sitting there and be like, okay, how is this page specifically different than any other page on my site? Is it page 1 of 7? Say
Hmm.
that. Is it a product? Is it a collection? Tell me all of that information so that you can really differentiate. That's really all you're really trying to do here.
No, that's so key. And as you know, what I say all the time is that, differentiation and branding is so key. And I love the way you phrase that as part of the job of what an individual page is supposed to do, because what you just said applies to SEO, it applies to usability. It helps when you just look at your pages and make sure that the customer understands this is what I'm supposed to be doing here. This is what I can glean from this page. Here are the actions that I should be taking on this page. When that's not clear, it's not clear. The customer doesn't know what to do, and sometimes it can, uh, confuse Google. The crawlers don't exactly know what to make of the page. So clarity is absolutely important, not only for SEO but usability, because they're all intertwined.
Absolutely. And if there's a page on your site that you don't want crawled by Google, like it's a staff page that is completely disorganized and doesn't make any sense and it's just for them, block it using robots text. It's a little bit more complicated, but you can block those pages from being crawled by Google so that you don't have to worry about those things on specific pages. So really only focus on the ones that you want Google to be seeing.
Okay, very good. Well, let's keep knocking down here. We'll go to headings here. We talked a little bit about the difference there, but go into a little bit more detail there.
So here's a fun statistic for you. 25% of all business websites don't have a single heading.
Wow.
So headings, like we said, are really going to be for the customer. They're going to be explaining what's going on the page and kind of divide it up. So best way to understand this is H1 is the biggest size heading you can have.
Right.
Then it goes down to H2, H3, H4, etc. Google only likes one H1. They want one main header to understand what that page is about, and then they are going to look less at smaller headings.
There's a hierarchy there, right?
Exactly. So what you want to do is organize your content in a way that makes sense to the customers, so they can be like, okay, so in this section, I get more information about what their story is. In this section, I get more about the history of the company. In this section, I understand that their services and how I can move on. So you really want to have different subheadings, but not H1s. So you can see that in any website designer you have, any WYSIWYG, they will have H1, H2, H3. They might call it maybe header and subheading on some older ones, but for the most part, you should be able to access H1, H2, H3, and just kind of organize your page that way.
Right.
So Google uses those headings to really understand what they, in addition to the page titles, what the page is about. So if you don't have either, they don't know what your page is about. And if you're missing one, they're going to rank you lower.
Do you see folks just kind of blow past this, Jess? They just kind of minimize the importance and they just don't give it attention? Is that what you often see, or?
Yeah. So if you have a product collection page and it's
Right.
just a bunch of pictures of all of your products, you're like, oh, I don't need a heading there. They understand products.
There it is. Right.
So Google doesn't understand. So you need
Hmm.
to put there that this is the products that you offer. Maybe it's all products. Maybe it's all Swiss cheese. But you need to be a little bit more specific about what is on that page and write it out in words. Because one, not everyone is a visual person. Not everyone can actually see. Some people are using screen readers. And then Google can't see. So you need to explain it to them in words.
Jess, how about, we talked about navigation earlier. One of the things that drives me crazy is when you have a link in the navigation and then you click to that page and it's something completely different, right? Or it doesn't have a title at all, like you said. That drives me crazy just from a user experience there. But is that a cardinal sin? How would you look at that from just kind of an SEO perspective? I know it drives me crazy from a UX standpoint.
Um, I would rank it pretty middle ground.
Okay,
It's not going to ruin your website, but it could be the difference between page 1 and page 2. It
sure.
could be the difference between ranking number 1 and ranking number 5.
Mhm.
So it does make a difference. And like you said, you don't want to drive your users crazy. That should be the number one thing you should be worried about. Google can come after that. So just make sure that you're really you're explaining everything about the website. Even if it makes sense to you, go show your like 5-year-old and see if they can navigate the website.
Well, and I refer to it as the bait and switch, right? If you've got something in there to where you're advertising, even if it's just a simple link, doesn't have to be an ad or anything, but if it's just a link to something and then you click and you go, what is this? What have I landed on? That creates such a jarring experience that it can really impact the flow of the site, you know. But let's go on to meta descriptions. What do we need to keep in mind there?
So I think we're actually back a slide. But meta descriptions are probably one of the most important aspects of SEO and
Right.
also one of the most overlooked. So you can see here on the example given right underneath digital marketing EYStudios services, there's a nice little paragraph there. It says, get your name out there with EYStudios marketing services, including PPC, email, social media, and SEO, blah, blah, blah. That is the meta description that we assigned for that page, so that when
Right.
people are searching for that page, where that page comes up, they understand exactly what services we offer within digital marketing. It explains exactly what they're going to find on that page, and it explains to Google what they're going to find on that page. So there are some keywords in there, but we're mostly just talking. We're talking like a normal person.
Right.
And that's the most important thing to remember when writing a good meta description. Talk like a person, limit it to 1 or 2, maybe 3 keywords, and keep it short, keep it simple, explain what's on the page, and have a different one for every single page. A lot of people like to just put their tagline. This is our business tagline. We make awesome Swiss cheese, and they put it on every single page as their meta description. That's not going to get you anywhere.
Right.
It might make your tagline rank pretty high, but that's about it. No one is going to be searching for your tagline.
But in terms of, we're talking about writing a good meta description, what are some things that they need to keep in mind? Obviously, keep it, short, pithy, to the point, make sure it sounds like a human being. I'm big on imperative verbs as far as call to actions there. The one here is get your name, showing what you get with that. What are some things in terms of actually writing this, the physical part of that merchants need to keep in mind, Jess?
Well, there's always the character count. So I like to keep a character count tool on my desktop and just write my meta descriptions there. So you need to keep it between 155 characters and 70 characters.
Right.
More towards like 130 is ideal. And so you can do absolutely everything you can do. You can write the perfect meta description. It might still be overrun by Google's AI written content. And I want to put a nice disclaimer out there for people. You can be the best SEO person in the world, and Google might still overwrite your meta description. The way that Google shows these meta descriptions sometimes is based on the search terms. So your page might be ranking very high for that search term, but your meta description doesn't quite fit. So they'll rewrite the meta description to fit the search terms.
Right.
So to keep in mind is, what search terms do you want this page to be picked up for? What is your audience going to be looking for that this page, you want them to be finding it? So, keeping within those parameters, but also just talking like a real person, not being a robot, not being an AI written robot. Keep those keywords in mind, maybe write a few, see what you think would be the best thing that you would want to click on.
Okay, very good. All right, well, let's go on to the next slide. Unless there's anything else on meta descriptions, can we go to page speed?
Absolutely.
All right. So this is huge. Obviously as a graphic guy, I have to keep this in mind with branding. And there's extremes, right? We've seen really crunchy JPEGs that look horrible, but we've seen graphics that are not compressed. But talk to us about the importance of page speed and of course image compression, Jess.
Sure. So one of the things that I do crawl for is page speed. Just making sure that when someone clicks on your page, they're not waiting forever and then they're just gonna be like, oh, never mind. Now keep in mind, a lot of those huge retailers, big box stores, the he who shall not be named, A word, they have slow sites. They don't have great page speed. But what you need to do is be better than them. You need to be offering that quick page load. All the pictures are there, all the products are right there, so that people are like, oh, they got it under control. They're not even thinking about loading. That's when you've won, is when they're not even thinking about the page loading. So image compression comes into this when, if you're a very visual website, this could really slow your site down if you have a lot of images that aren't compressed. It could take forever for your product to load. It could take forever for videos to load if that's something that you are really heavy on, if you have like multiple hour-long videos on your website or something for some reason.
Right.
So what you need to do is kind of evaluate what pictures could be compressed. Now there's way more advanced image compression technology these days where you're not just like making a great image into, like you said, a crunchy JPEG that no one can see. Compress with logic.
Right. Yes.
So compress the things that can be compressed. If you have a huge size chart that can't be read if it gets smaller, don't compress that. If you have an infographic that can't be read if it's compressed, don't compress that. But make sure that you're compressing as many images as you can, especially product images, to a point that they're loading quickly, your page speed isn't affected by your images and or videos, and you're not increasing your bounce rate simply because it takes a while to load.
Right. Well, you mentioned infographics. So this is one we just did, as far as it was the best times to post on social media, right? And so what went into, as we talk about alt text, tell us about that, as well as kind of what went in to the production of that graphic in terms of image compression.
Sure. So we worked with our designers, and they knew that they were designing for websites. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're hiring an outside design firm or you're just talking to your own designers, make sure that they understand that this infographic is going for a web page. It's not for a PDF. It's not for whatever, because that really affects things. If you've never been a designer, just trust me. So worked with the designers, explained that this is going to go in a blog post, gave them all the information, and we decided that we were going to compress it a little bit,
Right.
but we also allowed it to open in a brand new web page that people could zoom in on. If they wanted to, make it bigger, zoom in on there, really go at it. Because there is a lot of information in this infographic if they wanted to zoom in.
Well, and sorry to interrupt, but even just as a designer, one of the things I'm always thinking about is of course, the size of the text to make sure that people can see it. And at least, I mean, right now on the screen, it's going to be tough to see the exact times and all that, but you could at least see some of the things that may interest you. Oh, that's the Facebook symbol. Oh, that's the Instagram. So you see some things that can pop out. And so you want to make sure that part is clear. We've talked a lot about hierarchy within the page. It applies even to things like this with your infographic. But you're right. I mean, we have to optimize those and keep all of that in mind. Anything else on alt text we need to keep in mind?
So alt text is basically an image's meta description. So it explains what that image is, but it goes a little bit beyond that. In terms of writing a good alt text, it's a little different than a meta description. So a meta description, you're writing, what is this page about? What people might be searching for. Alt text, you're describing exactly what is in that image. No sales talk, no keywords, no anything. It is a woman wearing a blue shirt on a horse. That's it. She might be wearing a very nice blue shirt that you can put the product name in, you know, but overall, all you're trying to do is explain what is in that picture so that Google understands, but also so that anyone that's disabled or has accessibility issues, they can understand everything that's on the page with their screen reader. They're like, oh, okay, so that's the picture of this product. I understand. It's a girl on a horse. Got it. But also Google will then show it for anyone that is trying to do a reverse image search, or anything that is an image search of any sort will help with that. But overall, it helps you rank higher as well if you fill in all your alt text, because Google is looking for more accessible websites.
Right.
So the more accessible your website is, the better.
100%. Very good. Well, just to let everybody know, we've got about 15 minutes left of the webinar. We appreciate everybody staying with us, and hopefully you're getting a lot out of this content. We have one more segment to get to. We can click to that right now, which is on content. We all know that content is king, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that over the next few minutes. And I want to thank those that have been submitting questions. We've got some good questions loaded up for you, Jess, so we'll be getting to those right after the part with content. Again, if there's anything else you guys want to hit us with, we'll do our best to get to all those questions. But for now, let's go right into the importance of good content, all leading up to this here, Jess. So talk to us about the concept of low content to lead us off, Jess.
All right, so the way that Google measures whether or not you have content on your page is they measure the amount of code compared to the amount of words. And if that ratio is off, that's when they will ding it as low content. This will show up in any audits that you do, any kind of crawling software that you have. But low content to Google means this page is not worth showing. So you could have 800 pictures on there that are very useful. They could be infographics that are super useful, super great for your customers, but there's no content on the page, so Google's like, throw it out. So you really need to be measuring that, keeping in mind, maybe we just need to throw in a little paragraph explaining what this infographic is. That's all you need to do. And then other times they are measuring your entire website. So if there's very few pages, there's not a lot of content on them, they're just not going to rank your page very high. So that's where blog posts come in.
Right. Good lead into blog posts, absolutely.
Yeah, that's really where you're going to be able to shine in terms of blogs, or in terms of content. You're really going to be able to talk to your audience. You're going to really include some keywords. This is really where you can build your SEO, is in blog posts. And a lot of people think that blog posts are like an early 2000 thing, where people like cried about their feelings on Tumblr or something. That's not what we're talking about. You might want to think of them as articles. That helps some clients better understand what we're going for. We're really just trying to give as much content to Google as possible, explaining the purpose of your website. That's all that blog posts are. You're also trying to inform your readers. You're trying to inform your customers, give them good information, and identify yourself as an authority in your vertical, in your field, so that when someone's going, oh, Swiss cheese, I need to make Swiss cheese, I need to cut it, where do I go? Oh, right, that place that does all the blog posts about Swiss cheese.
I was so afraid, Jess, of this webinar not being cheesy, and you've just doomed us with all these cheese stuff. So I guess it's cheese in a good way. But you're right. So they're looking at the authority on cheese, and what do they say?
So yeah, it's really about setting yourself up as an authority in your field, setting yourself up as an authority in Google in your field so that they understand, all right, anyone that's looking for Swiss cheese, they're going to this website.
Mm-hmm.
But blogs in general, I mean, the statistics here are just so insane. Companies with blogs produce an average of 67% more leads than businesses that don't have blogs. That's insane.
Oh yeah.
Blogs can result in a 434% increase in the rankings of your pages. So this is not something that we're just like, oh yeah, write some blogs. This is important.
It's huge. But it gets dismissed, Jess,
Yeah.
all the time. I mean, people, I don't want to write a blog. Come on. What's that really going to do for me? But I can tell you what, it does a lot for us. I mean, if you guys, if you're enjoying this content, check out the blog on EY. But the importance of blog cannot be understated, because it does so much, not only for the content like we're talking about, but it defines the personality of that brand. There's a lot of ways that you can do that to imbue the personality into that brand. So I love what you're talking about there. What else we need to keep in mind?
I think like what you said with personality, that's really where you can shine with your brand. If you're a professional company, try and be more professional, medical, etc. But if you want to imbue some, funny sarcasm, that's the place that you can really shine and include some jokes and really showcase that you're a fun business if that's what you're going for.
Yeah, we have a lot of our dry competitors on here, Jess. Maybe they're just kind of looking for clues on how to inject personality into their brands. We're just trying to help our competition out a little bit. Get some of our cheese onto their site. Maybe it'll help them out a little bit. But
Yeah.
so link building strategy. What do we need to keep in mind there?
So with blogs, content, that's the king. But when you're writing a blog, it's important that you're thinking about where you're linking to within the blog. So you might be linking to really big news websites. You might be linking to other like e-commerce.
Right.
Maybe they're like BigCommerce. Maybe you're linking to BigCommerce's big website about their blog. You want to be linking to high searched websites. So you don't want to be linking to your neighbor's gardening blog. That's not going to get a lot of traffic. You're only helping her. You're not helping yourself. I mean, if that's really what you want to do, go help her gardening blog. But the most important links that you're going to be building are going to be higher ranking ones. From there, what you're going to do is a lot of outreach. Maybe you want someone to link to your blog, and that's really where the steam can build up. You can really get some momentum. You want those blogs to be shared beyond your own employees. You want those to be shared on LinkedIn. You want them to be shared on another company's website. You want them to be linked from another company's website. And that's really your goal, and that's your link strategy that you should be hoping for.
It's got to be meaningful, right? It's got to impact somebody's lives, and they have to understand the value very quickly. And that's why a good title is important. And it's important for the blog to make sure, we've talked about blog here, to make sure that that's it's getting that across very quickly. Otherwise, folks will tune out, disengage very quickly there. So good stuff there. Anything else real quick on link building, or you want to move on?
I will say 91% of all pages on Google don't get any traffic because they don't have any links.
91%. Wow, you're queen of the stats. I gotta hand it to you, Jess. You got it going on with that. So all right, so that's good stuff.
Amazing.
All right, well, I'm excited to get to these questions here. We've got several lined up. Real quick, I want to remind folks, we are giving away a free SEO audit if you're interested. If not, again, this is not a salesy webinar. If you're not interested in EYStudios, no problem. Hope this information has still helped you and blessed you. But we're offering that just for this month. We've got just a few. I can't believe we're at the end of the month almost, but we've got just a few days remaining to get that. Not offering it next month for free. So if you do want that, we've got a few slots remaining. We started advertising this earlier this month via our newsletter, and man, it's going like hotcakes. A lot of people are jumping on that. Jess is real instrumental in getting those audits, doing a fantastic job for merchants on that. If you are interested, hit us up at info@EYStudios or give us a call at our Georgia number right there, and you can get your audit going. So with that said, get past that bit of house cleaning. Let's get to the Q&A. I'm excited about that. Emily's gonna hit us up with that. All right, so first question, are you ready, Jess? Are you pooped on this? You still got some energy in your tank for these questions? All right.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm excited.
The first one is, are these recommendations relevant for search engines other than Google? We've talked about Google a lot here, but does this apply equally to Bing and Yahoo, or is it specific to Google? What do you think, Jess?
So the way that I approach SEO is Google first, because that's the #1 search engine that most people use. So I like to adhere to their standards first, and then it covers Yahoo, Bing, Mercado Libre. All of those other search engines are much less stringent in their standards. So if you are adhering to Google ones, you will adhere to Bing and Yahoo.
Okay, very good. Next question is, how do you determine what your keywords are versus what they should be?
Sure. So, I mean, you can't control what your keywords are. They are what they are. So it's good to know what you're ranking for. It's definitely good to keep that, like, track of that, keep that on a spreadsheet. But the research that you're doing for keywords that you want to rank for, there's going to be some differences. So yeah, the difference, how do you determine the difference, is whether or not you're ranking for it. Basically, what they should be is maybe what your competitors are ranking for. Maybe it's something along a product line that you're thinking of expanding into that you haven't really highlighted in the past. So maybe you're trying to focus on that specific product and those keywords. That could be a way to increase your keyword strategy.
So the data will reveal that for you. That's one thing that you can use to report on that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, there is some feeling behind it. There is some strategy of, a product line or anything like that that might be coming down the pipeline. But overall, data will reveal that.
Right. And when we think about one question we have about the rank tracking tool, there's a few things out there. What are your recommendations in terms of the tools to use for rank tracking?
Well, there's definitely a lot out there. It depends on how much of a budget you really have for this kind of thing. We use a few different ones, but HubSpot is probably the #1 out there. It's a very expensive, kind of high tier one that the big businesses would use, but the lots of money people. There's Ubersuggest. There's just Google keyword rankings. That's very basic and free, but there's not a lot of saving or tracking there. You'll just see where you're ranking, and then I guess you could keep track of it yourself. So if that's a free route that you could go, is just using Google Analytics rankings and tracking it yourself.
Okay, very good. Another question we have, and again, guys, thank you for these questions. This is what I was hoping for. I love to get interactive with the folks watching these webinars. Next question, Jess, is do video URL links have any impact on site speed, or is this just for embedded videos? Again, do video URL links have any impact on site speed, or is this just for embedded videos?
That's specifically for embedded videos. That's what's going to slow down your site. So anything that's going to actually need to load on that page is what's going to slow it down. If there's just a link, click here to go watch this video on YouTube, that's not going to slow down your site.
Okay, that's a very good question. All right. Let's see. Well, I think we've got 2 more questions here. So one attendee said, "I understand SEO is a slow process." Good, right? It's not overnight. It's not like my wife planting carrots in the raised beds in my backyard. It says, "I understand SEO is a slow process. What are reasonable expectations as to when a website may expect changes after implementing SEO changes?" Again, they're wondering, what are some reasonable expectations, Jess, if they're doing what they need to be doing, if they're following the recommendations from their agency or internal team, that a website can really start to see these changes. Obviously, that's going to be respective to the recommendation, but are there any general guidelines that you could help them with?
So yeah, it's going to depend on how large of a site you have.
Right.
Also going to depend on who your competitors are. So,
Right.
so if you are competing in a really competitive industry, it's going to take a little while longer than if someone was starting an industry that doesn't have as much competition. So when you're doing that keyword research, a lot of ranking tools give SEO difficulty numbers.
Mhm.
It's a number from 1 to 100, and it gives you kind of an idea of how difficult it's going to be to rank for that keyword. So if it's like a 94 out of 100, that means that like everyone and their mother is trying to rank for this keyword.
Right.
If it's like a 55, you have a shot. You absolutely can go for that keyword. You can absolutely improve upon it. In terms of timing, we do quarterly reports for our clients. Every 3 months we give a report, but I would say about 6 months is when you can kind of see some changes in the right direction. 3 months, you might see some things, you might see some improvements, but 6 months I would say is probably the minimum before you're going to see what you want to see.
Very good. Hopefully that's helpful to the person asking that question. I think we've got one more. It says, are your SEO recommendations the same for product category pages as they are for product pages? That's a great question. Are the recommendations we're making here the exact same for category pages as they are for product pages, Jess? What do you think?
Yes, they absolutely are. Google treats all pages exactly the same. They're not going to look at your site and be like, oh, this is an e-commerce site. Let me look at the products. Let me look at the product categories. They're going to say, this is a website. Let me look at all of the pages at the exact same way. So the recommendations for URL, page titles, headings, content, all of that stuff is going to be relevant to the categories as well.
Okay, very good. That's an interesting question, because sometimes you think, what we talked about earlier in regards to what should a page do, and obviously the action for a product page and a category page is very different. But when you think about it from an optimization standpoint, there are some similarities with that. So I love that question. That's good. Thank you for everybody that asked that. So we're right at time here. I appreciate you guys attending here, and you've seen the information here. Hit us up at info@EYStudios.com if you have any questions, and let us know how we did. This is the first of many webinars that we're going to be doing. We've got one planned next month for omnichannel. Jess, are you involved with that one? Are you doing omnichannel, or is it somebody else?
I think someone else is doing that, but I'm writing a lot of blog posts about it.
Right, we're doing some blog posts with that too, and I'll be here, and it's part of again our Make It Make Sense webinar series. And omnichannel is, it can be a buzzword, but it's something that we have a lot of thoughts about. It's something we're doing for our merchants, and we'll give you some more information related to that. But thank you again for attending the webinar. Again, we hopefully we gave you some good information to chew on that's applicable for your business. Again, my name is Eric Yonge. I'm the CEO and Creative Director of EYStudios, joined by the very impressive Jess Richmond. Jess, thank you so much for your insight and for all of your expert commentary. You're a joy to work with. I know our merchants love working with you as well. So Jess, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for listening to me ramble, guys.
All right, guys, well, y'all have a great rest of your day. Thank you again.